There's a version of yourself you've been apologizing for your entire life. The one who feels too much. The one who walks into a room and absorbs the tension before anyone speaks. The one who carries other people's pain like it's your responsibility to heal what you didn't break. You were told this was a gift, that your sensitivity made you special. But somewhere along the way, special started to feel like a sentence. Because the truth no one prepared you for is this. Empaths don't just feel deeply. They disappear slowly. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in small, quiet moments where their own needs become negotiable and everyone else's become urgent. You've spent years believing that caring deeply means being endlessly available, that if you're not there to catch someone, you've failed at the very thing that defines you. But here's what they don't tell you about that kind of thinking. It doesn't make you compassionate, it makes you a resource. And resources get used until there's nothing left. This isn't about becoming cold. It's not about shutting down or building walls so high no one can reach you. It's about something most empaths never discover because they're too busy saving everyone else to realize they're the ones drowning. There's a moment, a shift, when sensitivity stops being a weakness and becomes something else entirely. When the empath who gave everything finally understands that some people were never meant to receive what they offer. And in that understanding, everything changes. Not louder, quieter, not harder, clearer, but completely, irreversibly different. Most empaths never reach that moment. They stay in the invisible prison, convinced that if they just give a little more, try a little harder, stay a little longer, it will finally be enough. But enough never comes. Not because you're failing, because you were never meant to be everyone's answer. What happens when an empath stops performing? When they stop auditioning for a role they never auditioned for in the first place? That's where this begins. You walk into a room and you already know. Before anyone says a word, before anyone looks your way, you feel it. The tension, the unspoken anger, the sadness someone's trying to hide behind a smile. It's not a guess, it's not intuition. It's like your nervous system is wired to pick up frequencies no one else hears. And the worst part, you can't turn it off. You absorb it, all of it. The frustration your coworker won't name, the disappointment your friend masks with jokes, the resentment hanging in the air that no one else seems to notice, it becomes yours. And you carry it like you're supposed to. Like it's your job to make sure everyone else stays okay. But no one's checking if you're okay. Because you've become the person who doesn't need checking on. The safe one, the steady one. The one who listens without judgment, who holds space without asking for anything in return. And at first, it felt good. It felt like purpose. Like maybe this sensitivity that made you feel different your whole life actually meant something. But somewhere along the way, purpose started to feel like obligation. And obligation started to feel like slow erasure. You replay conversations for hours after they happen, analyzing every word, every pause, wondering if you said too much or not enough, if they're upset with you, if you should have done more. You apologize for things that aren't your fault because somewhere deep down, you've learned that your presence should come with no cost to anyone but yourself. You say yes when you mean no because saying no feels like letting someone down, and letting someone down feels unbearable, so you stretch yourself thinner. You show up when you're exhausted. You listen when you have nothing left to give. You carry conversations that others abandon the moment they feel better, never thinking to ask how you're holding up under the weight of everything you've absorbed. And here's the part that makes it worse. You feel guilty for even noticing, guilty for wanting reciprocity, guilty for feeling tired. Because isn't this what empaths do? Isn't this what makes you who you are? So you silence the part of you that's screaming for rest. You tell yourself you're being selfish, that you should be grateful people trust you, that if you were stronger, this wouldn't feel so heavy. But it is heavy. And it's getting heavier because the people you pour into, they're not pouring back. They're not asking what you need. They're not noticing when you go quiet. They've learned that you'll be there, that you'll absorb their chaos, their pain, their uncertainty, that you'll hold it so they don't have to. And you do, over and over, until you can't remember the last time you felt light. Until you look in the mirror and realize the person staring back has become a space for everyone else and no room left for themselves. You thought being an empath meant feeling everything, but what they don't tell you is this. You'll feel everyone else so deeply that you'll forget what it's like to feel yourself. And by the time you realize what's happened, you'll be so far gone you won't even know where to start looking for the person you used to be. There's a pattern you've been living inside of without seeing it. A cycle so familiar it feels like love, like connection, like purpose. But it's not any of those things. It's depletion dressed up as meaning, and you've been calling it care. Here's how it works. You meet someone, they're drawn to you, not because of who you are, but because of what you do, how you make them feel, how you listen without interrupting, how you absorb their problems and hand back solutions, how you never ask for too much, how you make their chaos feel manageable. They don't say this out loud, they don't even know they're doing it. But on some level, they found exactly what they were looking for. Someone who gives without keeping score, someone who won't walk away when things get hard, someone who will carry what they refuse to hold themselves. And you mistake this for being needed, for being valued. You tell yourself that this is what connection looks like, that real relationships require sacrifice, that if you just give a little more, stay a little longer, try a little harder, it will balance out eventually, but it never does. Because the people who are drawn to empaths aren't drawn to mutual exchange. They're drawn to endless supply. They've learned, consciously or not, that certain people will give and give and give without ever demanding the same in return. And you've been that person your entire life. So the cycle continues. You give more, you feel emptier. And instead of pulling back, instead of questioning why you're the only one holding this weight, you give even more. Because somewhere deep inside, you've tied your worth to how much you can endure, how much you can provide, how little you can need. You've convinced yourself that if you stop giving, you'll stop mattering, that your value is measured by your capacity to serve. And the people around you, they never correct that belief. Why would they? It works in their favor. This is the trap. Empaths think they're building relationships, but they're building dependencies. And the people benefiting from those dependencies will never tell you the truth. They won't say they only call when they need something. They won't admit they disappear the moment you're no longer useful. They won't acknowledge that the entire foundation of your connection is built on what you provide, not who you are. Because admitting that would require them to give something back. And giving back would disrupt the system that's been working so perfectly for them. You've been taught that being an empath means feeling deeply. But what they never explained is that certain people are attracted to that depth not to share it, but to take from it. Manipulators find empaths instinctively, not because they're evil, but because empaths do something no one else will. They stay when everyone else leaves. They forgive when forgiveness isn't earned. They make excuses for behavior that should have consequences. They absorb blame that isn't theirs. And they do it all while believing this is what love requires. But it's not love, it's extraction. And the moment you start to see that, everything you thought you understood about yourself and the people around you begins to crack. Not loudly, not all at once, but slowly, quietly, irreversibly. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no explosion, no dramatic moment where everything falls apart and forces you to see what's been true all along. It's quieter than that, smaller, almost unnoticeable at first. You're sitting alone after another conversation where you gave everything and received nothing. And for the first time, instead of making excuses for them, instead of wondering what you did wrong, you ask yourself a different question. A question you've been avoiding for years because the answer terrifies you. If I stop giving, would anyone stay? And the silence that follows that question is deafening. Because deep down, beneath all the justifications and all the hope and all the stories you've told yourself about why people need you, you already know the answer. Some of them wouldn't. Maybe most of them wouldn't. And that realization doesn't just hurt. It cracks something open inside you that you've been protecting your entire life. The belief that your love, your effort, your sacrifice mattered to the people you gave it to. But here's what you're starting to see. The people you would drop everything for wouldn't do the same for you. The ones you've rearranged your life around have never once rearranged theirs for you. The relationships you fought to keep alive would have died years ago if you'd stopped resuscitating them. And the most painful part, they don't even see the imbalance. Because to them, this is normal. This is what you do. This is who you are, the one who gives, the one who stays. The one who never asks for more than they're willing to offer, which is usually nothing. You've been holding up entire relationships by yourself, convincing yourself it was partnership, convincing yourself it was love. But partnership doesn't look like this. Love doesn't feel like this. And somewhere in that quiet moment of clarity, you realize something you've been running from your whole life. Some people are only in your life because of what you provide, not because of who you are. Not because they value you, but because you make their life easier. Because you ask for nothing and give everything. Because you've trained them to expect your presence without earning it. And now you're faced with a choice you never thought you'd have to make. Do you keep pretending? Do you keep playing the role of the person who needs nothing so everyone else can keep taking everything? Or do you let it die? The version of yourself that sacrificed endlessly. The identity built on being needed. The belief that your worth is tied to how much you can endure without breaking. This is where the old version of you starts to die. And it doesn't feel like freedom yet. It feels like loss, like grief, like you're killing something that was supposed to define you. Because for so long, being the empath, being the giver, being the one who could handle anything, that was your identity. That was how you knew who you were. And now you're realizing that identity was built on a foundation that was never solid to begin with. It was built on people who took and never thought to give back, on relationships that only existed because you refused to let them end, on a version of love that required you to disappear so everyone else could stay comfortable. And here's the truth that's both painful and liberating. Letting that version of yourself die isn't failure, it's survival. Because you can't keep being everything to everyone and nothing to yourself. You can't keep carrying people who wouldn't carry you. You can't keep calling depletion purpose and expecting to stay whole. Something has to give. And for the first time in your life, it's not going to be you. The shift doesn't come from anger. It comes from something deeper, clarity, a quiet knowing that you can't keep doing this, that the version of yourself who gave endlessly, who absorbed everyone's pain, who made yourself smaller so others could stay comfortable, that version is no longer sustainable. So you begin to pull back, not dramatically, not with announcements or explanations, but slowly, deliberately. You start withdrawing your energy from the people and places that have been draining you for years. And it feels strange at first, almost wrong, because you've spent so long believing that caring means carrying, that empathy means absorption, that if you feel someone's pain, you're obligated to fix it. But you're starting to understand something most empaths never learn. You can feel without absorbing. You can care without carrying. You can witness someone's struggle without making it your responsibility to solve. This is the difference between reactive compassion and intentional discernment. One depletes you, the other protects you. The old version of you would have overexplained everything. Why you couldn't show up, why you needed space, why you couldn't keep being the person they called at midnight but never checked on during the day. You would have apologized for having limits, justified your boundaries like they were crimes, but now you're learning the power of silence, of simply not being available, of letting people wonder where you went instead of handing them a detailed map of your inner world they were never going to respect anyway. You stop people-pleasing, not because you've become cruel, but because you've realized that pleasing everyone meant betraying yourself. You stop fixing people who don't want to be fixed, not because you don't care, but because you finally understand that you can't save someone who's committed to staying broken. You stop carrying conversations that others abandon, not because you're petty, but because you're tired of performing connection with people who only show up when it's convenient. This is what boundaries look like when they're real, not loud declarations, not walls built from resentment, but quiet, consistent choices about where your energy goes and who gets access to it. Selective availability, emotional containment, the ability to be in the presence of someone's chaos without letting it become yours. And the people who've been feeding off your limitless empathy, they notice immediately, because the supply they've been drawing from has stopped flowing. You're not refusing to help. You're refusing to help people who mistake your empathy for weakness, who see your care as something they're entitled to instead of something they should honor. And here's what you're realizing. True empathy doesn't mean destroying yourself for others. It means knowing the difference between support and self-sacrifice, between compassion and complicity, between being kind and being available to people who would never do the same for you. You can't pour from an empty vessel, and you've been empty for so long, you forgot what it felt like to be full. So now you're doing something radical. You're keeping your energy for yourself. Not all of it, not selfishly, but enough to stay intact, enough to remember who you are beneath all the roles you've been playing, enough to stop collapsing under the weight of everyone else's needs. This is energetic sovereignty, the understanding that your energy belongs to you, that you get to decide where it goes, that protecting yourself isn't the opposite of empathy, it's the foundation of it. Because an empath who doesn't protect their energy becomes a shell, and a shell can't help anyone, not really, not in any way that lasts. So you stop apologizing for taking up space. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You stop giving pieces of yourself to people who were never going to give anything back. And slowly, quietly, you start to feel like yourself again. Not the version they needed, the version you were always meant to be. Something happens when an empath stops performing, when they stop explaining, when they stop offering their emotional labor to people who never valued it in the first place. They become unreadable. And for the people who have been feeding off their empathy for years, that silence is destabilizing. Because manipulators rely on empaths to react, to engage, to care so deeply that they'll tolerate anything just to keep the connection alive. But when the empath goes quiet, when they stop chasing, stop fixing, stop absorbing, the entire dynamic collapses. And the manipulator is left scrambling, trying to figure out what changed. What changed is this. The empath's sensitivity didn't disappear. It sharpened. It transformed from a vulnerability into a detection system. They still feel everything, but now they're feeling differently. They sense inauthenticity the moment it enters the room. They catch the manipulation before it fully forms. They see the patterns they used to excuse, the guilt trips, the subtle blame shifting, the ways certain people only reach out when they need something. And here's the difference. They're no longer obligated to fix it. They're no longer compelled to engage with behavior they can see clearly now for what it is. This is the power most empaths never discover. The ability to witness without absorbing, to see someone's game without playing it, to feel the pull of old patterns without giving in. And the people who used to rely on their empathy, they don't know what to do. Because the empath who used to drop everything, who used to apologize for things that weren't their fault, who used to carry the entire relationship on their back, that person is gone. In their place is someone quieter, calmer, less accessible, and far less easy to control. This is strategic empathy, not the absence of care, but the presence of discernment. The understanding that empathy is not a resource to be given freely to anyone who asks. It's a gift. And gifts are meant for people who honor them. So the empath begins to choose when to show up and when to stay back, where to invest their energy and where to let things fall apart naturally, for whom to extend compassion and for whom to simply observe from a distance. And this choosing, this discernment, this refusal to be everything to everyone, it doesn't make them less empathic. It makes them sovereign. The chaos that used to define their life starts to fade. The endless texts from people in crisis who never asked how they were doing. The one-sided conversations. The emotional emergencies that always seem to happen right when they finally had a moment of peace. It all quiets down. Not because those people changed, but because the empath is no longer available to participate in dynamics that deplete them. They stop over-functioning. Stop trying to be the answer to questions nobody actually asked them to solve. Stop explaining themselves to people who were never going to understand anyway. And here's what they realize. The people who weaponize kindness can only do it if you keep offering kindness without limits. The moment you stop, the moment you become selective, the moment your silence communicates what your words never could, the power shifts. Because silence is not weakness, it's boundary. It's clarity. It's the refusal to engage with anything that doesn't honor your worth. And the people who've been taking advantage of your empathy, they'll try to pull you back in. They'll accuse you of changing, of being cold, of not being the person you used to be. And they're right, you're not that person anymore. You're the version of yourself who finally understands that protecting your peace is not selfishness, it's survival. And survival looks like knowing when to speak and when to let your absence do the talking. That's where the real power lives, in the space between what you used to give and what you now choose to keep. This is what untouchable looks like. Not cold, not closed off, not someone who stopped feeling, but someone who can no longer be manipulated. Someone who still feels deeply but responds selectively. Someone whose compassion is no longer a resource anyone can access simply because they want it. It's reserved now, protected, given only to those who've proven they'll honor it instead of exploit it. The shift is subtle but undeniable. There's a calm that wasn't there before, a stillness. The empath who used to fill every silence, who used to rush to fix every problem, who used to carry every conversation, they're different now, quieter, more observant. They watch more than they speak. They listen without immediately offering solutions. They're present but not available in the way they used to be. And people notice. They can't name what's changed, but they feel it. The energy is different. The desperation is gone. The need to be needed has dissolved. And in its place is something that makes people uneasy. Self-possession. This empath doesn't audition anymore. They're not performing empathy, hoping someone will finally see their value. They're not bending themselves into shapes that might earn approval. They've stopped trying to prove they're worth keeping because they've realized something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The people who are meant to stay will stay without you convincing them. And the ones who leave when you stop performing were never yours to begin with. So they move through the world differently now, with an inner authority that doesn't need validation. They don't explain their boundaries. They don't justify their choices. They don't defend their right to protect their peace. They simply exist in alignment with what they know to be true. And that alignment is magnetic in a way their old people-pleasing never was. Because this isn't someone trying to be liked. This is someone who's decided that being whole matters more than being wanted. Their compassion hasn't disappeared, it's deepened, but it's no longer indiscriminate. They care, but they don't carry. They support, but they don't sacrifice. They show up for people who've shown up for them. And for everyone else, there's polite distance, cordial detachment, the understanding that not everyone deserves access to the depths of who they are. And they're no longer apologizing for that. This isn't hardness, it's wholeness. The empath who was fragmented across 100 different people, trying to hold everyone together while falling apart themselves, they've gathered all those pieces back. They've reclaimed the energy they scattered. They've stopped fragmenting themselves to fit into spaces that were never meant for them, and now they exist as a complete person. Not perfect, not without struggles, but no longer breakable by people who mistake empathy for weakness. Untouchable doesn't mean unreachable. It means unmanipulatable. It means you can feel someone's pain without making it your mission to erase it. You can witness someone's chaos without diving in to organize it. You can care about someone without being destroyed by them. And the people who used to take advantage of your boundless empathy, they can't anymore. Not because you've built walls, but because you've learned the difference between openness and availability, between kindness and compliance, between being an empath and being a doormat. And once you know that difference, no one can convince you to forget it. That's what makes you untouchable. The truth you finally understand is this: becoming untouchable was never about building walls. It was never about shutting people out or hardening yourself against the world. It was about honoring the truth of who you are, about realizing that your sensitivity was never the problem. The problem was believing that sensitivity meant you owed everyone access. That feeling deeply meant you had to give endlessly. That being an empath required you to be a resource instead of a person. You don't need to become less sensitive. You need to become more selective. And there's a profound difference between the two. Sensitivity is your nature. Selectivity is your protection. One is who you are. The other is how you survive being who you are in a world that will take everything if you let it. Here's what changes everything. The people who truly value you will never punish you for having boundaries. They won't guilt you for needing space. They won't disappear when you stop performing. They won't treat your limits like betrayal. Because real connection doesn't require you to destroy yourself. It doesn't ask you to be everything. It honors you as you are, boundaries and all. And the people who can't accept that, they were never connecting with you. They were connecting with what you could do for them. And losing access to people who only valued your output, not your existence, that's not loss. That's clarity. This journey doesn't require anyone's permission. Not your family's, not your friends, not the people who benefited from the old version of you. You don't need to explain why you're different now. You don't need to justify why you're no longer available in the ways you used to be. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to protect yourself. You're allowed to reclaim the parts of you that you gave away thinking it was love. So here's the question. What's one thing you're reclaiming in your own life? One boundary, one piece of energy, one part of yourself you're no longer willing to sacrifice. Leave it in the comments. Not for me, for you, because saying it out loud makes it real. And remember this, being open is a gift. Being available is a trap. Know the difference, and you'll never lose yourself again.